I'm 29, and I think the hardest lesson of my adult life is that love does not automatically make a person safe. I used to think it did, or at least that it should. I thought if someone loved you deeply enough, they might hurt you by accident, sure. They might disappoint you, misunderstand you, let you down in small human ways. But I didn't think they would stand there in a moment of anger, reach directly for the thing they knew would damage you most and use it anyway. Now I know better. Her name is Alina. She's 32. We were together for a little under 2 years. When we met, she felt like the most emotionally intelligent person I had ever been with. Calm voice, sharp mind, funny in this dry, understated way that made even routine errands feel a little more bearable. She remembered details. She asked questions that made me feel seen. She offered support without making me beg for it. And because I lost both my parents young, that kind of steadiness hit me harder than it probably would have hit someone else. You don't realize how vulnerable grief leaves you to certain kinds of love, not necessarily manipulative love, just structured love. Love that feels organized and competent and grown. Love that makes you think, finally, maybe I do not have to carry everything alone. I was still in the later stretch of my degree when we got together, but I already knew what I wanted afterward. I wanted service work, discipline, structure, the Coast Guard if I could get in, or defense adjacent public sector work if I didn't. That rhythm fits me. Clear stakes, clear expectations, a world where showing up actually means something. Alina hated the idea. At first, it sounded like politics. She's very left, very ideologically certain, very convinced that some careers cannot be morally separated from the institutions around them. Fine, people disagree. But the longer we were together, the more it stopped sounding like abstract disagreement and started sounding like a warning. One night, after I showed her an application packet, she looked at me and said, I don't know if I could stay with someone who chooses that. I asked if she meant it. She said, I'm just being honest. I might leave. That word might can do a lot of damage. It gives you just enough hope to start bargaining against yourself. The second issue was physical intimacy. I am not some guy who needs fireworks every other night. I just wanted to feel wanted by the person who claimed she saw a future with me. At first, things were fine, not wild, just normal. Kissing, touching, enough warmth that I assumed we had slightly different drives, but would settle into something workable. Then it slowly disappeared. I would initiate. She would pull away again and again and again. Eventually, she barely wanted to kiss, stopped wanting me to touch below her shoulders, started going physically still in bed if I tried to be affectionate in a way that might lead somewhere. When I finally asked if something had changed, she just said, I could live my whole life without sex and be fine. She was not being dramatic. She meant it. I remember sitting there thinking, okay, but I can't. And somehow from that moment on, I started feeling guilty just for having a body. Like wanting intimacy inside a romantic relationship was proof I was shallow, needy, inconvenient. The third issue was harder to explain without sounding petty. She was emotionally brittle, not immature in the obvious sense. She was employed, organized enough in the broad strokes, capable of adult life. But emotionally, everything had to be handled at exactly the right angle, the wrong joke, the wrong tone. A suggestion that she plan one step ahead, a gentle piece of advice, even a sigh at the wrong moment. Anything could make the room go cold. She also had this frustrating split between what she wanted and what she practiced. She talked about wanting a stable future, but she slept until 1 on weekends and then panicked about lost time. Left messes everywhere and got defensive if I cleaned them. Avoided responsibility in small day to day ways and treated basic planning like a personal attack. So gradually, I found myself in a relationship where my future had to bend around her ideology. My sexuality had to shrink around her indifference, and my words had to tiptoe around her sensitivity. And still, I stayed because when someone is good in the right moments, you start treating the wrong moments like a temporary weather system. You keep thinking, once this passes, we'll get back to us. Then she got pregnant. Yes, the baby was mine. That part was never in doubt. Later, medical testing and timing confirmed it fully. For a little while, the pregnancy actually made me hopeful. We talked names, compared strollers, laughed about how neither of us knew what we were doing. I started looking at rings, seriously, not some vague fantasy, a real plan. I wanted to propose before the baby came in a way that felt intentional and steady and not driven by panic. I had not told her that, obviously, but in my head, I was building something, trying to. Then we took a final trip before everything got harder. Just a long weekend away. One last break before appointments, exhaustion, and baby logistics swallowed all our time. And on the second night, we had a fight. It started over engagement, or really over what engagement symbolized to her. She said she was tired of being the woman who always had to wait, that everyone else our age was further along, that she was pregnant and still somehow living in uncertainty with a man who always seemed almost ready for the next step. I told her that wasn't fair, that I was building toward it, that wanting to do something properly was not the same thing as avoiding it. She said that was just another version of delay. Then the fight turned vicious. She said if she were not pregnant, she might have left already. She said maybe she had built me up into something I wasn't. She said she was tired of pretending I was enough when I still felt like an unfinished man. That line alone could have done real damage. But it wasn't the worst thing she did, not even close. At some point, she unlocked her phone, opened a file, and shoved it in my face. A video. A video of her with her ex, explicit, short, but long enough to weld itself into my memory. Then she said, at least he never made me feel unwanted. I physically recoiled, not metaphorically. My body literally pulled back from her before my brain had even finished processing what I had just seen. I have been cheated on before, more than once. She knew that. She knew exactly what sexual betrayal had done to my head in the past. She knew what kinds of images stick, what kinds of comparisons rot people from the inside. And in 1 second, because she was angry and scared and wanted power back, she weaponized all of it. I left the room immediately. Then I left the hotel. I walked along the water in the dark, half dressed, feeling like I might throw up. She found me about an hour later, crying, apologizing, saying she did not mean it, saying it was in a deleted folder and she never actually watched it, saying she only said it because she felt abandoned and panicked and did not know how to hurt me less, and because she was pregnant, because I loved her, because I was in shock and not thinking clearly, because part of me was still trying to find the version of her I thought I knew. I tried to reset. We got dinner, acted almost normal, even laughed once or twice. From the outside, we probably looked like a couple who had a rough fight and pulled it back from the edge. Inside my head, though, the video replayed constantly. In the elevator, video. In the bathroom, video. In the shower, video. Lying beside her in bed, video. It was like my mind had become a projector with a broken off switch. That night, she tried to be soft again. She changed, put on a nice dress, tried to reconnect physically. And every time she touched me, the image came back harder. Finally, I told her I couldn't do it, that I was trying, but I couldn't stop seeing it. She went cold instantly. Then she said, "So I shave, put effort in, put on something nice, and you still can't be there for me?" I remember staring at her in disbelief because somehow within hours, the emotional burden had shifted back onto me, as if I was now failing her because I could not immediately recover from being deliberately humiliated, as if her need for reassurance had become more urgent than the damage she'd just done. I slept on the couch, or rather, I lay there staring into the dark while every unresolved problem in our relationship lined up in my head like a prosecution witness. The career threats, the intimacy mismatch, the way she turned fear into punishment, the way my needs became pressure and her needs became truth, the way I was forever expected to be understanding, patient, flexible, and emotionally available, while she could become cruel and call it honesty if she was upset enough. That was the night the whole relationship rearranged itself in my mind. The video was not the only problem. It was just the brightest flare in a sky that had been full of warning lights for months. When we got home, she tried to act like we had survived something ugly but manageable. I couldn't do that. I told her I needed space, real space, not a few tense hours until she decided we were supposed to be normal again. She cried, asked if I was really going to do this now, reminded me she was pregnant, reminded me we were about to be parents, said she had made one horrible mistake in a moment of fear and that I was acting like everything good between us meant nothing. That is when I finally said the sentence that changed everything. I said, "The problem is not one mistake. The problem is that when you feel threatened, you become dangerous." Silence, real silence, because she knew exactly what I meant. And so did I. Update one. We started individual therapy, not couples therapy. Mine because I could not stop the intrusive replay. Hers because, according to her doctor, pregnancy had amplified emotional volatility that was already there before hormones made everything louder. I am trying to tell this fairly. She is not a cartoon villain. She can be generous, brilliant, thoughtful, capable of real tenderness. But there is also a version of her that emerges when she feels rejected or powerless, and that version does not care what it burns down if destruction gives her leverage. That matters. Even if there are explanations, especially if there are. Update 2. We are no longer together. We are preparing to co parent. The pregnancy is going well. The baby is healthy. And yes, ending a relationship during a pregnancy feels exactly as horrible and guilt soaked as you would imagine. But staying would have been worse because distance made one thing brutally clear. I had built my future around the hope that love would eventually solve incompatibility, that if I stayed calm enough, kind enough, steady enough, she would stop threatening my career, stop treating my needs like burdens, stop turning fear into emotional violence. Love did not solve any of that. It just kept me in place long enough to absorb more damage. I still think about the proposal sometimes, the ring, the life I thought I was about to formalize. And every time I do, I feel both grief and relief. Grief for the family I imagined, relief that I saw who she could become before I tied myself to that version of her forever. We will always be connected because of our child. I accept that. I will show up. I will co parent. I will do everything I can to be kind, stable, and present, but I will not spend the rest of my life beside someone who reaches for my deepest wound the second love stops making her feel secure. And if there is one thing I know now, it is this: someone can love you and still be unsafe for you. That sentence would have offended an earlier version of me. Now it feels like the closest thing to peace I have because I kept trying to sort people into easy categories, good or bad, loving or cruel, safe or dangerous. Real life is uglier than that. A person can hold your hand when you're shaking and still know exactly where to cut when they want control back. And once you know that, you cannot unknow it. I still get the image in my head sometimes, less often now, but sometimes. What hurts more these days is not the video itself. It is the fact that the woman who said she wanted a future with me knew in one furious second exactly what would destroy intimacy between us and used it. That is not complicated love. That is a warning. And I am finally old enough to stop calling warnings something we can work through.